Staunch Gang, I want you to teach me how to be fabulous. What's up, everybody? We have one heck of a wild flick to talk about tonight. A flick that I feel is just more widely seen than people think. I actually consider it to be a near perfect film, in fact, but you just don't really hear anyone talk about this thing anymore, which is weird. I guess it's kind of a niche subject matter, I suppose, but the ups and downs and the ins and outs and the drama and the mystery and the madness that surround this real life story, it makes for one hell of a movie. And I understand these are real life crimes, real life people involved, but this isn't the first time I've covered these kind of movies. Not really. I mean, I recently touched on stuff like River's Edge and Black Circle Boys, both films that deal with real life crimes from some very young people. But, with tonight's film, well, we get a real bloodbath. A disco bloodbath, if you will. That's right, Staunch Gang. Tonight is the night that Rats on Crack attack. Hop into my UFO and let's finally talk about one of my favorite movies of all time, Party Monster.
I'm Macualay, king of the club kids. I want you to teach me how to be fabulous. Don't dream it, be it.
Fabulous! I'm getting away with murder and you're just jealous.
Party Monster chronicles the rise and fall of the club kid scene in the 80s, all told through the eyes of the young, hopeful Macualay, who moves to town and befriends celebrity James St. James. What follows is a road to excess, a road to debauchery, a road to hell. Based on a true story. I've always felt that this movie was just a cut above other true crime films from the era. For a lot of reasons, but the main one being, the documentary aesthetic throughout. I mean, the film is grainy, raw, small scale, and just paced to perfection. The kind of indie movie that really does it all on screen, you know what I mean? Even when they're cutting corners, which the film does. But this is all largely due to the previous documentary, also titled Party Monster, the Shockumentary, which was made by Fenton Bailey and Randy Barbados, the duo behind the World of Wonder company. And, they had a pretty cool band back in the day. They're club DJs forever, so they're very much tied into this. Now, the making of the documentary was kind of like, the blueprint for everything, but even the documentary was based on James St. James' memoir, Disco Bloodbath. So they're all just kind of like demented cousins, And there are scenes taken straight from both the memoir and the documentary. Some pretty iconic shots of Seth Green, sitting next to the pool. They directly recreate the scenes from the documentary of James St. James. And stuff like that just goes a long way to tie these worlds together, make it feel so real, because it is a very real story. But as usual, there are a few things omitted, when it comes to making the feature film as well. Like, sadly, Screamin' Rachel didn't appear in the film. I don't think so. And overall, the portrayal of Michael that we get is the version of Michael that James St. James put out there. Like, the version we all know, that we think we know, it's all straight from James St. James' book. Which is, of course, another thing the film has going for it. It's all based on James St. James' goddamn memoir. So, with the involvement of James St. James and World of Wonder, we had people that were actually there, actually involved with these events, making the film, which is always a plus. Even a lot of the club kids are actually here in the actual movie, so it's pretty cool. In fact, it seems the only person not involved really was Macualay himself. Kinda, he did have one major contribution to the film. I guess being in prison, for murder will complicate things, make you not have as much time for extracurricular activities like making a movie, but we'll get back to Michael's contributions in a bit. But either way, it's interesting viewing the film all these years later. It really was. It was a fun rewatch. I kind of forgot about the movie as the years went by, honestly. And there's some really creative choices made here, man. It was a very eye-opening experience. If you haven't seen the movie in a while, I highly recommend you go do that. It's all done on a budget. It's amazing. I already knew that. But a lot of the scenes in the film, I would just call iconic. From the club performances, and even the private dance that Michael and James share. Which is just such an honest and tender moment in this crazy film. And I feel like that scene alone kind of encapsulates this lifestyle in a nutshell, minus the murdering and stuff. And damn it, Seth Green kicks ass in this movie. I'm only ever reminded of it when Seth Green comes up in conversation, which is like 5 times a day, And you know me, I'm a sucker for child stars from my youth. And with Party Monster, we get a 1-2 punch of not only Seth Green, but Macaulay Culkin as well. How badass is that? It was a real shock to see him in this movie, I tell you. And while they're both simply amazing here, I gotta say, Seth Green really knocked it out of the nightclub, man. That dude is awesome in this movie. So was Macaulay, of course. In fact, I'd say Party Monster is the best from both of them. And good thing we got Macaulay involved too, man. A direct portrayal of Michael really wouldn't have been as appealing, in my opinion. The dude's a little rough around the edges, and Macaulay just brings his character to life in so many other ways. In fact, whenever Seth Green and Macaulay Culkin were cast in Party Monster, they had just met a few months prior, and they just became friendly, and so immediately they were both just so ready to work with each other. And I don't know, which is cool too, because these guys weren't really too well known at the time. Everyone knew who Macaulay was. We hadn't done a movie in like 9 years or something, which was, I think, Richie Rich. Fun fact, there was a club kid named Richie Rich. Also, Seth Green, he had done like, some high profile stuff, the Austin Powers movies and whatnot. I think he had just wrapped up with part 3 when he got this part. But this was the first time that he was asked to bring it and lead a movie, basically, be like what co-lead, which there's some big platforms to fill there. So basically, they were like clean cut boys, still A-list actors, I guess, but clean cut boys, which is strange because the movie gets very dirty. And even though we technically got A-listers in the lead, I mean, we got to put things into perspective too, man. Like, it was still very risky to have these guys lead a film. But it's all wrapped up nicely with the rest of the cast. They go the indie route with some staples like Natasha Lyonne, Daniel Franzese, who appeared in a similar film, Bully, and here he has a lot to do, actually. And even Chloe Sevigny, who was an actual no bullshit club kid with Macualay back in the day, so that was sweet. But they also snagged some pretty big names like Dylan McDermott, Mia Kirshner, Marilyn Manson, who has some of the funniest lines in the whole damn movie, by the way.
How do you like my UFO?
And there's even a cameo from John Stamos. So you can't have a movie like Party Monster without John Stamos. But perhaps the biggest get, aside from Culkin, was Wilmer Valderrama. Pretty insane. He was a fairly big deal around that time. And this is a daring role for him to be taking. I never took Valderrama as a risk taker, you know what I mean, when it comes to his career. But he's really good in this flick as DJ Kyoki. And as for Angel, he's portrayed by Wilson Cruz, who really made his mark in the early 90s in My So-Called Life, being one of the most memorable characters from that show. So it was pretty neat to see him in this. But the big question with any of these movies, how real is it? That's always an issue, I guess, with these flicks. They change things like names and places, etc., as to not, I don't know, further traumatize the family, River's Edge, for instance, it kind of just took the idea of the real event and did its own thing with it. Same with Black Circle Boys and stuff like Bully. Whereas films like, Alpha Dog, they all follow the real events pretty closely, but they change the names and stuff like that too. So I get it, when dealing with crimes involving teens, it makes sense. But here with Party Monster, I'm guessing because they were all a little older when it went down, they changed nothing when it comes to the names and, events and places and whatnot. So it's pretty damn crazy. Although, narratively, they may have switched it up a little. When Macualay was eventually released from prison, well, he had a lot to say about things that, weren't so true that made it into the film. A lot of which he says, were actually wrong in the original book. So he was just saying that there was just a lot of fabrications, nothing too crucial, I guess. Minor stuff like, certain conversations never happening. Left out reasoning that kind of makes sense of little things. Apparently, James accused Alec of letting his cat starve to death. Drano and needles, the usual stuff.
Walking through Times Square, it's like living in Blade Runner.
Mm-hmm.
It's like instant future that I've woken up like Rip Van Winkle kind of.
But one of the most insane aspects not retained from the book, according to Macualay himself, was just how much drugs were consumed by the whole bunch. Like, in this movie, they do a lot. But apparently that was nothing compared to real life. And this movie has, overdoses and stuff in it. So, that being said, a lot of the film's events did come straight out of real life. A lot of those events being the most tragic. We can't forget here that there is an actual victim. As fun as the movie is, Angel Melendez did lose his life at the hands of Macualay and his cohort Freeze. And all in all, Alec, and in my opinion, a lot of the other club kids were just flat out awful people. And there's just such sad stories about, Angel's brother searching for him, and nobody really caring, because, it's a drug dealer, Colombian descent, and it's all just so tragic. It's all so damn sad and artificial. These youngsters looking for fame or any way out they can. The road to excess really must have been very appealing. And the film does a fantastic job, by the way, at showing the decay of club life and indulgence. I've always admired films that, take that route. They especially with the drug use, they treat it as a real thing and not, some crazy, fun, trippy experience or whatever. Although it does play with that too. I mean, this deals largely with ketamine and being in the K-hole, and they really get that on screen, And luckily for us, though, with all these heavy elements, Party Monster finds the perfect mix of dread and whimsy. And the set dressing for most of this insanity, as we all should know by now, is Club Limelight, one of Peter Gation's most infamous nightclubs. In the film, the infamous club mogul Peter Gation is played by Dylan McDermott, who also stands out here, by the way. Now, Gation claimed innocence at the end of all this, but come on, man. Now, the documentary Limelight does have some conflicting moments in it when watching the Party Monster shockumentary, but I guess we all get to tell our own sides of the story, right? Even someone like Peter Gation, who in all really is the reason that Melendez was selling drugs in the first place in all these clubs. But I don't know, Peter Gation is just such a huge part of the story. There's FBI files mentioning Gitsy and Alec and everyone else, and Gitsy was actually supposed to testify against him, but she had an overdose, and there was some other happenings there. Check out Limelight if you get a chance. And to have the FBI involved with all this, looking to slap Gation with drug charges, I mean, it was all very real, as was the FBI kind of ignoring rumors about Michael killing Angel. They just kind of didn't care, it's so sad. Another bizarre twist in the tale. But you see what I mean? All of this is just primed for a feature film, and someone like James St. James, a self-described media whore, knew all too well that the story could be profitable. And by the way, when Alec was released, he was very vocal about how James St. James exaggerated, and in some cases, totally fabricated moments. But with these guys and all those drugs, I mean, who knows? I don't know. James did appear on Alec's podcast a few times, the PU, and they hung out a lot. I think he was on like 3 episodes before he finally got fed up with Michael all over again. Now, going back to the film Party Monster, it definitely takes its subject matter very serious, and at sometimes it's represented with dreary, facing reality strikes of cinematography that really puts you in places like, dirty, overcrowded, tiny apartments, or like you feel the loneliness when Michael's in jail locked up, and it even manages to get the viewer in a K-hole as much as possible. Yet at the same time, the film does all this with its tongue firmly planted in some cheeks. I mean, in its own cheek. The filmmakers are having a good time with it. So it's tongue-in-cheek is what I'm trying to say. Put it that way. Again, I cannot overstate how funny this movie is.
Hey, Christina, I've decided to make you my first superstar.
It makes me laugh every time. As dark as the film gets, a good laugh is never too far away, it seems. For example, like the film's darkest moment here, where we see the actual crime go down, we see Alec and Freeze take Angel's life. Well, it's all told through a K-hole from James St. James, and he's talking to this giant rat, and this giant rat's just narrating everything that happened, and he has a VHS copy of the murders. Brilliant. The rat played by Franzese as well. It's pretty funny. It's just absurd in every way, and that's probably the only way the film could have been done. I really feel like the directors knocked this thing out of the park. As far as Macaulay's portrayal of Alec, I mean, it's hard to tell how close it came, and how if he does a good job or not, I suppose. You gotta remember, this was his first time back after leaving the business 9 years prior. So just watching multiple interviews with Macualay and whatnot, I really feel a disconnection from himself and Macaulay's take on the dude. I don't know. Honestly, I think it might be that Macualay's nasally underwater voice just stands out so much. Macaulay should have maybe tried to imitate him a little more. I don't know. Macualay did talk with Culkin about his dissatisfaction with the portrayal, though, in some scenes at least. And Culkin basically told him, hey, I was getting direction from the guys, I did my best. Speaking of which, I said earlier that Macualay didn't have much involvement in the film. Well, that's not entirely true. Alec was involved in pre-production in the sense that he got to pick who portrayed him, or at least he got a say in it, right? So when the directors approached Macualay about the casting, Michael Alec's first choice was actually Macaulay Culkin, so we have him to thank for that. Although if they couldn't get him, Alec's second choice was Tobey Maguire. Jesus Christ. And that all led to Macaulay visiting Michael Alec in prison to discuss the role and see how Michael would react and talk and whatnot. So he did some mirroring exercises and they just got to hang out. The directors were there as well. So they really got to hit it off there, you know what I mean? And Macaulay spoke about this and said that it was all very enlightening, yet he sensed Alec was putting on a show at times, which he probably was. But, Michael Alec did say that when Macaulay left the prison, he had the character down to a T. He was Michael Alec when he left. And that Macaulay was ready to bring him to the screen. But, of course, to Alec's dismay, he was not impressed with the final product. And I get that. The character was definitely ramped up a bit, to feel more entertaining. And, it works. But still, Michael Alec in real life and on film, just two different vibes overall. Now, let's be honest. Over the years, it's become pretty clear that Michael Alec wasn't a very good person. Obviously, right? Upon Michael Alec's release from prison, he got a lot of promotion. He would even start a podcast called The PU, which is just full of info, but not shot very well. Yet all of Michael's former friends that were still alive, they wanted nothing to do with them. Not really. Even James St. James, like I said, he did like 3 episodes and took off on his ass. But little by little, everyone just left Michael behind all over again. All the former club kids, in fact, were working directly with World of Wonder, and World of Wonder, they wanted nothing to do with Michael as well. So he was just not allowed to join in on the fun, not one of the cool kids anymore. And it's been a while since Alec passed, and that sentiment never really changed, sadly. James St. James would always joke about how he never liked them, yet they were still friends. And over the years, looking back, he said that he couldn't reconcile the friend he thought he had in Michael with the actual Michael Alec. There's always that duality with this dude, it seemed. And that, everyone says he was just pretty much horrible the entire time. I suppose James St. James is out from the Michael Alec cloud nowadays, a cloud that he ironically, gave Alec through his book and everything like that, through the film and whatnot. But Michael Alec isn't giving up, even in the afterlife. Recently, James St. James talked about going to a psychic where Michael decided to show up.
I went to a psychic last week, and he said to me, do you know somebody named Michael? And I said, yes. And I don't think he knew, James St. James, I don't think he knew anything. And he said, Michael is here, and he's tapping me on the shoulder, and he's being really annoying, and he wants you to know that everything you said to him, he understood, even if he pretended that he didn't. And that he understood the gravity of what happened. And he said, I don't know what he's talking about, but he understood it even if he never let on that he understood.
So who knows? I guess Michael Alec made peace with James St. James in the end. But it's all just such a sad story, It seems everyone involved was pretty much self-serving, and even though these people are responsible for turning Alec into a celebrity, it was also the same exploits of Michael Alec that in turn put them on the map, being James St. James and World of Wonder, So, you got to give Michael Alec his flowers. In the film, James St. James proclaims, I was the original club kid. In fact, it was Michael Alec that brought that subculture to life, so he's even to thank for that. So long live Michael Alec, what the hell. But the days of club kid excess are long gone, and all the clubs are turned into Starbucks or McDonald's. Hell, even Club Limelight tried, they renamed themselves Avalon after a while before closing for good. I think it's like a theater or something now. It'd be cool to check it out. And sadly, a lot of the notable side characters from the film have long passed as well. Those that remain, they all moved on. You can still catch DJ Kiyoki. He's out there doing his thing. Brooke, played by Natasha Lyonne, she actually got involved with the FBI Peter Gatien stuff as well. She got busted selling drugs when she said she would stop. She did some prison time, but she is now a successful entrepreneur in Dallas. Even Freeze got his shit together, man. He got out of prison, and he's a college graduate now. He collaborated on some papers and stuff. And of course, RuPaul, who was heavily into the club kid scene, well, she broke into the mainstream with Drag Race, which is produced by World of Wonder. And actually, James St. James appears on it a few times, so that's pretty sweet. And characters like, Gitsy and Christina and even Angel, while passing before their time, are forever club kid legends. As for James St. James, well, he's still very much James St. James. And he does talk about the film, and Michael when he's asked about it. It's just that with all the glamour and everything, it's all still tied in to this loss of life, which is just crazy all these years later. I mean, have we ever been privy to a story like this before or since?
I don't think so.
Now, is there a moral here? If there is, I'd say it's maybe, I don't know, don't do crack without heroin. I'm just kidding. I'd say the lesson here is maybe equal parts a cautionary tale on the dangers of excess, and also maybe things like, being cautious of unknowingly welcoming exploitation on all accounts. For example, a docuseries is being worked on before the murder was uncovered, and they're shot in Michael's apartment and whatnot. They're working on this docuseries, trying to push it or whatever. This is kind of like early World of Wonder days, and then it's in that footage where we get the surprising just revelation, Michael admitting on camera to the murder, even before the authorities knew about it, and everyone's just like, what this dude?
I killed Angel, and that's the kind of thing that gets me in trouble.
But it wasn't until the events were uncovered and Macualay was arrested that World of Wonder then ironically found funding for a bigger project, and in turn we got a feature-length documentary, and we got the domino effect and got the movie, and everyone got their day in the sun, right? Just so insane. And in the end, Party Monster doesn't really take any responsibility as far as, making the film a cautionary tale, I guess, which is in a sense refreshing. Because these guys are all artists and whatnot. It's not really their place to do so. But I do think that kind of whole overall vision allowed for the story to be told as honestly as possible. Again, all of this in my own opinion. And I consider Party Monster to be a masterpiece. The best of all that were involved. The best of the genre. Simply put, fabulous. Staunch Gang, let me know down below what you think of Party Monster and the whole story. What other movies like this should I cover? Let me know down below after you please like, and comment, please comment, and make sure you subscribe. Hit that notification bell. There's a link down there to some Staunch TV swag. Hit it up. There's a video right now hovering over my face. That's a good one. I don't know what it is, but it's a good one. I handpicked it for you guys, whatever the hell it is. So until next time, my dudes, stay fabulous.